Hey class! Today we're going to continue on with chapter 3 and we're going to move away from cells and go more towards our tissues. Now, this is going to be a very long lesson, so that's why only today you're going to be listening to this. There will be no worksheet or any other activity. Now, since this is a long lesson, make sure that you're understanding what is being talked about. If you get confused at any point, you are more than welcome to rewind any part of this video and watch it. Also, if you raise your hand or email me, I can come over and answer any questions that you want. So let's go ahead and get started. What are tissues? Tissues are defined as groups of cells with similar structure and function, and these cells all work together to make tissues. There are four primary types. The first is epithelial tissue, also called epithelium. This is going to be the tissue that we're going to talk about today. The next one is connective tissue, followed by muscle, and last but not least, nervous tissue. If we were going to use one word to describe the overall role or function that each of these different tissue types provide the body, we would use the following words. For epithelial tissue, we would use the term covering because epithelial tissue is often found covering organs. Next is connective tissue. These provide support for the body. You will find bone in this category. Third is muscle tissue. This is used for movement. And last but not least is nervous tissue for control. These terms are one-word descriptions that help describe its role, but remember, this is only a tiny fraction of functions that these tissues provide the body. As already stated, we're going to start, and this lesson is going to be about epithelial tissue. A description of epithelial tissue is it helps line, covers, and is found in the glandular tissue of the body. When I say glandular, this is going to be your glands. Things like your oil glands or your sweat glands, or even glands that leave the pancreas and secrete different things like insulin. So again, glandular is glands. Epithelial tissue location is going to be all over the body. It's going to be covering body surfaces, so body coverings. It's going to line different organs. And of course, it's going to be found in those glandular tissues, like we mentioned, sweat, oil glands, glands leaving the pancreas, glands leaving the liver, etc. Let's start off by talking about epithelium's function. We said covering, but that's not its only function. Epithelium help with protection. Epithelial of the skin helps protect against bacterial and chemical damage, and epithelial lining in our respiratory tract, these have cilia on them, and these help sweep dust and other debris away from our lungs so that bacteria doesn't get in our lungs and hopefully we don't get pneumonia. The second function is absorption. Epithelial are found lining the digestive tract and they help absorb food nutrients into the body. They are also found in the kidney, and they help absorb water and other solutes. And when I mean solute, I mean things that are going to have a charge, like sodium ions or potassium ions or even calcium ions. They also help with filtration. As mentioned, they are found in the kidneys. They help filter the blood and remove any unwanted substances. And the last one we're going to talk about is secretion. These are specialty of the glands. These help produce substances like sweat, oils, digestive enzymes, and mucus. These are going to be your glandular. Some hallmarks or things that help describe epithelial tissue. Again, they cover and line body surfaces. They often form sheets in which cells bind together at many, many points. The only exception is the glandular tissue. With these sheets, there are two major parts. There's the apical or apical surface and the basement membrane. The apical surface is where it's unattached surface and is exposed. The basement membrane, this is the part of the tissue that anchors it in place and holds it where it needs to be. One thing about epithelial tissue is that it is considered avascular. Avascular means that there is no blood supply to these tissues. Oftentimes, you can get scratched on the surface of your skin and you're not going to bleed. You have to get into a deep enough layer where blood vessels are located. Also, these cells also regenerate very easily as if they are nourished. Now let's get into how do we classify epithelia. Epithelia's name has two parts. The first part of the name is going to tell you the number of cell layers. For example, if its name starts with simple, it means it has only one layer of cells. If its name starts with stratified, it's going to have more than one layer. The second part of the name is going to tell you the shape of the cell. If it is squamous in its name, that means these cells are going to be flattened. If its name has cuboidal in it, the cells are going to be cube-shaped. And if the name has columnar in it, they're going to be shaped like columns or rectangles. The number of cell layers and the shape combine to help make the epithelium's name. So for example, if you have a name of simple squamous, you know that these cells are going to be one layer and they're going to be flat. So again, when I say simple, I mean that one single layer. Here's a picture of your apical surface. Apical surface, this is your free one that's not attached to anything. And here's your basal membrane or your basement surface. This is going to be the part that helps attach and hold down that tissue. If I said stratified, here you're going to see, oh, this is a lot of layers. Again, it's still going to have an apical surface and a basement membrane. Here are the different cell types. We have squamous, so you can see that it's pretty flat, cuboidal, more cube-shaped, and then, of course, columnar is more rectangular shape. So here is an overview of this. This is located in your book that helps give a description and functions. So let's start off with talking about simple epithelial. So you're going to notice in your notes that there's a side called simple epithelial tissue. This is the side we are covering. These tissues function in absorption, secretion, and filtration. They are very thin, and so they're usually not suited for protection. The first one we're going to talk about is simple squamous epithelium. If I was going to give a description, these are a single layer of flat cells given by the name simple and squamous. These are usually located and they form membranes where filtration and diffusion occur. The reason is we want these areas to be very thin for things like air or oxygen to move across the membranes and CO2 to leave. These are going to be found in the air sacs and lungs, so basically where gas exchange takes place. They're also going to be formed in your capillaries. If you don't know what capillaries are, these are going to be your smallest blood vessels in the body. So we want exchange to happen there so your cells can get oxygen. And this is also going to form your serous membranes, or in other words, membranes that line organs in your ventral cavities. Remember, ventral are going to be things like your thoracic cavity and your abdominal pelvic cavity. Their function is going to be diffusion, filtration, and secretion. Here, if we're going to look at a picture of it, if you were going to provide a drawing, again, it is just a single layer of flat cells. So flat cell, all the way across. The next one we're going to talk about is simple cuboidal. Again, the description, simple tells you that it's a single layer. Cuboidal tells you that these are going to be cube-shaped. They're going to be located in glands and the ducts of glands. That just means the tubing. It's also going to be found forming the walls of kidneys. and it covers the surface of ovaries. The function is secretion and absorption. For example, these types of cells are often ciliated and they help propel mucus and they help reproductive cells move as well. So here, if you're going to provide a picture, it is a single layer of cells that are shaped like a cube. Simple columnar, hence the name simple, it's going to be a single layer. Columnar tells me that they're going to be tall cells. These types of cells often have something called goblet cells associated with them, and these help secrete mucus. Since they secrete mucus, these are going to be located along the things like your digestive tract that lines all the way from your stomach to your anus. These also are going to cover and be located wherever you see mucous membranes. These are usually going to be the cavities that are open to the exterior. So things like your mouth, your anus, other mucous membranes include your eyes. Your eyes. These help function in secretion and absorption, and usually they have ciliated surfaces that help propel mucus. Again, if you were to draw them, it's a single layer of very tall cells. And the last one that we're going to talk about is pseudostratified columnar. All of these cells rest on the basement membrane. It has the name stratified in it, so most people think that it are made up of a bunch of cells, but it's actually just a single layer. Some cells are shorter than others, but all of the cells, again, are attached to that basement membrane. So, since some cells are shorter than others, it gives a false impression of being stratified or layered, but it's not actually. So, pseudo means false, hence pseudo-stratified, false layering. These are located in your respiratory tract, where you're going to find a lot of cilia, and they function in absorption and secretion of mucus. So here's a picture of it found in your respiratory tract. Notice here, they look like they're stratified, you have a layer, but you see here, this one is actually attached to the basement membrane right here. This one doesn't look like it's attached, but it's attached. All of these are going to be touching the basement membrane at some point. The second set of epithelial tissue we're going to talk about, these are going to be our stratified epithelial. Again, stratified means it's going to be two or more cell layers, and their main function is going to be protection. Since there's a lot of cells layered on top of each other, you can get a scratch and you can take off those cells because there are so many, so hence protection. So the first one we're going to talk about is stratified squamous. The name tells me that stratified is going to be multiple layers. Squamous tells me that these cells are going to be flat. Now, this is the most common type of stratified epithelial, and these are going to be including your skin, mouth, esophagus. In other words, it provides protection where there's a lot of friction. You have a lot of friction happen on your skin all the time in your mouth because you're talking. There's going to be friction among your tongue and the inside of your mouth, and even your esophagus because you are constantly breathing in food or breathing in air. You're eating food that's going to rub and cause friction. Here is an example of a stratified squamous. It's a bunch of flat cells layered on top of each other. So notice the farther they get to the top, the flatter they get. Here's a better picture, and you're going to notice all of these cells flattened. The next one we're going to talk about are going to be 2 for 1. Stratified cuboidal and stratified columnar are usually talked together. If you were going to look at a description of stratified columnar or stratified cuboidal, stratified tells you that it's going to be multiple layers, so usually 2 layers. Cuboidal, the cells are going to be cube-shaped. Whereas stratified columnar, stratified means there's going to be multiple layers, but columnar says they're going to be more rectangular shape. Now, stratified cuboidal and stratified columnar, their location, they're actually pretty rare in the body and only found in specific areas. Mainly, these are going to be found in the ducts of large glands. And their main function, again, like other stratified epithelial, is protection. So over here, if we're going to draw a picture, here we have 2 layers of cuboidal, so they're more cube-shaped. Over here, stratified, we have 2 layers on top of each other, and these are more rectangular shaped. And the last one for the stratified epithelial is going to be transitional epithelium. If you're going to provide a description, it is composed of modified stratified squamous epithelial, hence modified. The reason they're modified, and I would also add this to your description, is because the shape of the cells depends on if it is being stretched or not. If the cells are unstretched, they appear more rounded, dome-like, like cubes. However, whenever these are stretched, they appear flat or squamous-like. So here's my location. The lining of the urinary system, specifically within your bladder. The reason is they focus on function on stretching. Your bladder is generally not stretched, but as it fills with your urine, it's going to constantly get bigger and stretch and stretch and stretch. Then when you decide to relieve yourself in the bathroom, it's going to go back to its normal shape. So this is a good example where you're going to find transitional epithelium. Here you go, here's an example. Again, if it's resting, they're going to appear cube-like, but when you stretch them, think about a rubber band, it gets flatter. The last type, and this is what we're going to end on, is glandular epithelia. Remember I said glandular means gland. Well, what is a gland? A gland are cells responsible for secreting or basically releasing a product. These products are known as secretions. They are generally going to contain protein molecules that are in a water-based fluid. And secretion is an active process, means that we use energy to secrete these products. There are 2 major gland types. There are endocrine glands and exocrine glands, and I'm going to ask you this on your test. Endocrine glands are things that are ductless. What does ductless mean? Well, it means that these secretions are going to be diffused directly into blood vessels. For example, things like the thyroid, your adrenal glands, and your pituitary gland release hormones straight into blood vessels or straight to where they need to be released. Exocrine glands are going to be secretions, but they just don't empty directly into a blood vessel. They go through something called a duct, which is basically a tubing to wherever epithelial surface it needs to be released to. These include things like sweat glands, oil glands, your liver is going to have a bile duct, and then you also have your pancreas, which also has a duct that releases into your stomach. And that is the end of today's lesson. This is very, very content heavy material. What I would do is I would start making flashcards for your test. I would start learning this stuff and studying it at night because you will see this on your test. We will have a few worksheets and we will have a Socrative over this material, but with this class being so heavy in information, I would go ahead and get a head start on learning and studying this information. If you have any questions, please make sure that you ask, and otherwise that, I hope you guys have a great day.